Torgets stora scen har vi här och vi går raskt vidare med nästa programpunkt. Då är rubriken Rätten till mat i Indien. Och det handlar om det marginaliserade urfolket Janadi och deras dagliga kamp för rätten till mat och försörjning. Ni är välkomna upp på scenen Ravi Kumar, han är ordförande för FIAN Pradesh. Och vi har Mikael Jonsson, projektsamordnare för FIAN-Sverige. Och det här scenprogrammet genomförs på engelska. Ni ska också få en applåd.
Thank you. Warm welcome and thank you for the great introduction. As I said, with me on stage I have my dear colleague Ravi Kumar, president of FIAN Pradesh. And since 2008, FIAN Sweden has supported FIAN Pradesh in their work together with the Janadi communities in southern India. And the Janadis are a tribal group who historically has lived as nomads, mainly around the coastal area in the state of Andhra Pradesh. And ever since the 1800s, this tribal group has been exposed to violations such as forced displacements, colonial assimilation processes and discrimination, both by the British colonizers and the Indian government. And these kind of human rights violations are still going on today. And when FIAN Pradesh first started supporting the Janadi communities in 2008, it was due to similar violations. Mainly in 2007, the construction of a giant port called Krishnapatnam Port outside the city of Nellore was started. And the port itself claimed around 550 hectares of land. But at the same time, the Indian state established a so-called special economic zone that almost claimed 5,000 hectares of land. And the port was inaugurated in 2008 and has since been expanding a lot. It is now India's largest private sector port. And it was due to this huge infrastructure project that FIAN Pradesh first came in contact with the Janadi communities. And Ravi, could you please tell us how you and FIAN came in contact with the Janadis and how this port construction affected their lives and livelihoods?
Yeah. Krishnapatnam port was constructed. Because of that, most of the people's lives were affected. And there were many people agitated because of the construction of Krishnapatnam port construction. Many people's livelihood affected and they are forced for the displacement and so much of exploitation they faced in that area. And different communities are there in India. They all started to protest that. And some of the people got very much a response because of their strength, because of their voice. But Janadi people who are among one of the tribes have really faced so much of difficulty. Even they didn't get any support for these protests. And their right to livelihood was severely affected.
And how did this port construction affect their livelihood? What happened when the port was constructed that ruined their chances to?
Yeah, these landless Janadis were completely depended on the fishing from the small canals which is connected to the sea. And they used to get a good amount of money for their food and water and other basic needs. Once they constructed the Krishnapatnam port, they didn't get anything. They were really struggling to get their food. And it is a completely exploitation by the government, even by the port authorities.
So these canals that they were dependent on for their livelihoods were polluted, and the fishing waters became bad, and they couldn't really provide for themselves in the same way they did. But at the same time, you and FIAN Pradesh was approached by one village called Chalivandram. Could you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, FIAN is a human rights organization working for the right to food in Andhra Pradesh. Then these Chalivandram people approached FIAN and asked to support for their struggle. Then the FIAN is a case documented with adequate information for that, and started to support that community to give a right to food for them.
And could you give us some examples on how you were working together with this village in the beginning?
Yeah, we have a kind of methods to work with them, and after case documentation, we started capacitate all the people in that village. There are 48 families from Chalivendram village. We capacitated them. We also engaged them to go with the along with other people to meet the higher officials for an advocacy work. And advocacy is the important for FIAN. After doing the case documentation, we went there and asked the government, this is the situation. Yanadi's livelihood was severely affected, but we want development, but not this kind of development when people are affecting and their lives are affecting. So as per the FIAN, we started an urgent action. Even 2009, we came here in Sweden along with the FIAN Sweden members. We visited different places. We visited universities from the law and other colleges. They all sent letters to the government saying that what is this, how these people lives affecting. You have to provide and protect their right to livelihood. When they received letters from FIAN Sweden, other people, immediately they responded. They formed one committee, and the committee visited the village and did a survey. But we asked to provide this livelihood for 48 families. Then they started to give approval for 528 families who have lost their livelihood due to this Krishnapatnam port construction.
There were sure a lot of human rights violation involved in this port construction. You could see clear violations of the right to food and right to livelihood, for example. And these positive developments that the urgent action and your tireless advocacy work led to was sure great. But you also faced some difficulties in your work. Would you like to tell us a little more about those?
Yeah, that difficulty is always there because the community is most vulnerable community in the Indian society, and they always face difficulties and discrimination, and they are they are not well educated, and because they are the people who are most vulnerable and exploited within the Indian society and struggling a lot. When they approach even the government officials offices, they don't get a respect, and they submit again and again. Number of times they submit their memorandums to get their entitlements, but they never get that. Completely neglecting and ignoring and not responding on their memorandums. It is a kind of discrimination still they are facing with the with the officials.
A clear example of that connected to the port construction was that you saw a lot of other villages around the port that was also affected. For example, some fishermen villages of higher caste and higher up in the social hierarchy, that they got the compensation really quickly. But still today there are many families, many Yanadi families still waiting for the compensations, right?
Yeah, Yanadis are voiceless people and very innocent people. They are very good. They depended on the forest. But whereas the other people, other community, other fishermen community and other communities who are dependent on the sea, they had strong groups and they had a strong voice and they had a political support, and all together they joined their hands and they demanded the government to get get the compensation, and government granted compensation, given land and boats and other compensation benefits to them, but not anadis.
And what kind of compensation packages were contributed to the few Yanadi families that accessed them? What did they get instead of their fishing waters and instead of their forests?
Yeah, they inherently they depended on the fishing, but all of a sudden the government given a rickshaw, the government given some goats, the government given some water buffaloes for milk. So these kind of simple things they have given to keep them, it's not really to develop their lives, because they failed to provide alternative livelihood sources which will give a sustainable life and good life, but they failed it, and only for the namesake they have given some compensation packages. But even though that is also not reached all the people, and only 230 people only got that compensation, but not all the families who have been affected due to the construction of Krishnapatnam port.
And it's clear that there is some problems with the reach, that they're not reaching everyone, but also a problem with the actual compensations. I mean, providing goats and rickshaws, for example, doesn't really reflect on the Yanadi's traditional lifestyles. And since 2008, FIAN Andhra Pradesh, the work you do in Yanadi communities has expanded to also you now support over 30 villages, right, around Andhra Pradesh, and not all these villages are affected by this port, but they're affected of the same kind of discrimination and the same kind of marginalization and lack of access to rights. Could you tell us some more about these struggles, for example, for just gaining access to the basic social security schemes?
Yeah, this is one way they lost their livelihood. The other way, they are not having access to social security schemes. There are many social security schemes which are not getting these people and facing very difficulty to get from that the government. Now what they started with the capacitation of FIAN, they have started now to ask, to demand the government to get their entitlements, and they are succeeding with a lot of difficulties. And in our meetings, one woman said that how she fought and got ration card. It's very very tough. And she had shared her experience with other community members. They have also now very happy that they are looking now very positively to strengthen the village, the community, to raise their voice, even to get more entitlements which are available from the government. And one more woman also, she fought for land. After 6 years, she got land. This is all challenges they are facing to get their right to adequate food.
So the general situation, you would say that these communities, they have to approach and approach and approach again to the government officials in order to just get their basic social security.
Yeah, this they have to. It's not that easily they get any entitlement. They get with a lot of struggle. They are the people finding always difficulty even to get the food. But you can imagine even going very far to meet officials to get their entitlement is a big problem. Very tough task for them. Even though they have no other ways, but they are now learning to question the authorities. Now they are strengthening. To write their memorandums to get their entitlements.
And most of these communities live as landless people. You mentioned this woman who had fought 6 years that was just a small piece of land, right, to cultivate her own food for the family. What effects do you think the lack of entitlements to land and the lack of entitlements to even their own house, what effects does that have for these communities and for them to claim their actual rights?
Yeah, these are all the communities severely, affected by the port construction. Not only that, even if you see the other villages, neighboring villages who are not even connected to the port, they are also struggling a lot. These people have no land. They inherently depended on the forest, and but their profession is hunting. Their profession is rag picking, and their profession is catching the fish. But what is happening now, though they are living in the forest, they are not having their own land. They have no identity. They are really moving place to place. Internally displacement is there, and most of the people are threatening them for their own benefits, for their development.
And to a high degree now, they are really dependent on these social security schemes that they also paradoxically find really hard to access to. And among other things, the government promises jobs for rural people, or people living in the rural areas of India through the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. But that's not really benefiting the Janadis as it is supposed to, right?
Yeah, what they are saying that there is a act, Right to Employment Guarantee Act, which is saying that to provide 100 days of guarantee work for the jobless people in the rural area. But practically it is not happening. When we survey, on an average 28 to 30 days, they are getting work instead of 100 days. But when we ask the authorities, they speak that yes, there is a act, there is a work 100 days, you can work there. But it is not connecting them well to get the very access to work 100 days. But that is also one of the problems they are facing in the villages.
And these harsh situations with discrimination and landlessness and lack of access to rights, it's surely nothing unique to the Janadis. I mean, this is rather a common situation for most indigenous and tribal communities in India. And I know in 1970, the Indian state ratified the Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. But they did so with one reservation against Article 1 that declares all people's rights to self-determination. And I think this is really illustrative on the relationship India has to its indigenous and tribal groups. Their claim was that this right to self-determination only applies to people under foreign domination and not to sovereign independent states or to a section of people such as the tribal groups living under a nation state. And you want to share some just final reflection on this?
Yeah.
On this point?
Yeah, the Indian state is surely not respecting and not responding people's right to self-determination. Most of the indigenous and tribal groups are landless, but still live off the land they inhabit. And without proper rights and entitlements to land, they often live under very insecurity conditions, very vulnerable for land grabbing and exploitation from both the state and the private sector. To a large degree, most of India's strategies for poverty eradication build on the ideas of the charity, not rights. They feel that we are giving the charity basis, not that they are giving their entitlements, their rights. So this is a big problem to create an understanding even with both authorities and the people. The charity is different from the rights. These are people rights. They are the rights holders. They are entitled to get all their rights. People are asking rights, not rights. What the government is doing, when people are asking rights, they are giving a rights, telling that yes, this is a rights. Even though not that it treating as a right on charity basis. So these kind of problems and mindset having the people. And I would like to tell one thing, finally, the unwillingness of the state. The unwillingness of the state is, not giving opportunity to enjoy these most vulnerable communities with right to adequate food.
And the state of India kind of reserves itself to just anytime they feel like to take away the land of many indigenous and tribal groups, and instead provide food or jobs through social security schemes like this. And it's a really big problem with the lack of access to land, for example, and secure land entitlements. But there's a growing human rights movement in India right now, and they're fighting for better protection of land rights for these groups. What are your hopes for the future? Just final thoughts. Do you think this will lead anywhere, and do you think this movement will keep growing?
Yeah, this is a really big challenge for all the people. It's not only one community, for all the communities. When we are treating it as a human rights, we are all going with a big hope that definitely we will achieve it. Now the groups are strengthening. They are also, inviting other groups. They are also meeting other groups. Their capacities are increasing and strengthening the platform to raise their voice strongly. Earlier it was not like that. They always try to live in isolated places. Now they are coming to the mainstreaming and they are demanding their rights. I hope that definitely the day will come to raise strongly their voice to get their right to adequate food and other rights.
And that's all time we got, so thank you so much for listening, and let's stay hopeful for a better land reform in India.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tack. Thank you, Ravi, Kumar och